that where you made the booking. So it'll be available, and all the other webinars will be available from then. So as I've indicated, we are recording all these sessions so that we can share them wider. Once Faye has done a presentation and we get into questions and answers, we will stop the recording then, just to allow people, if they feel that they want to ask something without the recording on, it might be a bit more open and free from that. So Faye suggests if you want to introduce yourself, put it in the chat so I can see people are introducing and hopefully networking a little bit there. So with no delay, I'll hand over to Faye, Faye Purley, who's the clinical lead occupational therapist for the Bradford and Craven Long COVID team, and she's here to talk about vocational rehabilitation and the learning from the Long COVID team. So over to you, Faye.
Hi, thank you, Freya. Thank you, everybody, for having me. So Freya asked me to come and talk today a little bit about the vocational rehab service that we've been offering in the Long COVID team over here. And kind of widely, more broadly in the NHS, there isn't too much vocational rehab going on. And so Long COVID services, because they had really specific aims and funding, we have had the privilege of being able to set up a vocational rehab element to our service. So I am part of a broader service, and I'll go into that a tiny bit to give a little bit of context today, which will hopefully help, and then talk a little bit more about the vocational rehab side of things and what we've found through working with people. I am happy to answer any questions as we go, so feel free to either put your hand up or put those things in the chat. I know sometimes when the question comes up in your mind, it can feel more relevant to ask at the time, so I am also happy to take questions as we go. Okie doke. So hopefully today, if I give you a bit of an overview of what I'm hoping to cover. So I just wanted to cover a little bit about what Long COVID is for anybody who might not know too much about it. Although I can see from the chat, there's quite a few people with both personal and professional experience of working with Long COVID, which is great. I'm just going to touch briefly on what our pathway is, and then the context of that within the vocational rehab service we've been offering. And we've been doing that in quite a unique way in group work with some one-to-one as well. So I'll explain a little bit more about that. And then I just wanted to talk about some of the reasonable adjustments we are kind of recommending for people and what we're really noticing is working for people. And I've also got some figures about what we've been doing so far, and also some resources that might be useful. Okay, so I'm hoping that this 2-minute clip video is going to work now. So if someone can give me a thumbs up if the sound does work when I press play, that would be great. Is that working?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
So I just wanted to give a bit of an overview of long COVID there. Hopefully, that was straightforward and most people have a bit of a broad idea anyhow. And I just wanted to kind of include this wide-ranging symptoms that people are experiencing, and we are supporting people with long COVID. And I think what this picture illustrates quite nicely is it's not just about the individual symptoms and the impact that that has on somebody. It's also this kind of adjustment and acceptance to having a long-term condition, having a disability. A lot of people would kind of say it, they class it as, and how changing their life and their occupation and what they want to be doing is really quite life altering and quite life changing for people. And we're really kind of supporting people, as especially in the vocational rehab, but in lots of areas on the pathway, more about how they can maybe adjust to these symptoms, how they can live with them, really kind of showing people what self-management is, but also recognizing that that's really hard and it's not easy. And hopefully the kind of plethora of that comes across in this image here, because I think it really is an up and down journey that is really not linear for lots of people. So the support that we provide people hopefully encompasses what they need from an emotional perspective, as well as kind of from a self-management and symptom management perspective. So in terms of our long COVID service, we are a rehab focused service. We encourage self-management techniques to reduce kind of the symptom flare up. We're very much about patient initiated support. So for most people coming through our service, they are encouraged to engage with the pathway themselves. A lot of the support we provide is virtual. There is some face-to-face and one-to-one stuff, but a lot of what we do is virtual group work. And that allows us to really help people share that narrative of what's going on for them. And I think to some degree that's been the strength of the vocational rehab service that we're offering at the moment, is that ability to share with other people what's going on for them. So we cover, in terms of area, we cover Bradford, Airedale and Craven, and we're a big wide MDT of professionals all working together. I won't go too much into our pathway, but I just kind of wanted to say that our vocational rehab service is very much backed up by all these other amazing interventions and group services that our service is offering in the background. So whilst we're seeing some really amazing results on the vocational rehab side of things, a lot of that is because the patient has had access to these other areas of self-management on the pathway. So these are some of the groups that we provide, as well as lots of other one-to-one and face-to-face support on the pathway. So if anyone has any questions about that or the service or long COVID in general, please do pop them in the chat. So more onto the vocational rehab side of things now, I guess. So this is a slide actually that I use in one of my patient group sessions, and it's just a discussion really around, are employers ready to support people with long COVID? So we know generally that only a quarter of organisations provide line managers with training and guidance in how to support people with long-term conditions. So for some people, they very much come in feeling like, I'm not understood, my manager doesn't want to help me, they're not doing the things that I've asked them to do. But in actual fact, a lot of the time, I think managers have very limited understanding and awareness of what they could do to help, or what they're allowed to do, or how they could help support somebody with their symptoms. So whilst we know that long COVID is still quite a big issue in the workplace, in the sense there is a lot of sickness related to it, and lots of people, even some companies saying it's their main reason for sickness, still we know that probably managers don't necessarily have the right information and the right kind of support to help people. So part of what we're doing, hopefully, is allowing and giving patients information that they can pass on to their manager or their employer about long COVID and what sorts of things can help. And we know as well, sort of anecdotally through working with people now with long COVID for over 18 months, we know the occupational health support that people get is really wide ranging and varied. So sometimes it's really good, but sometimes it's not available for some people. And sometimes when it is available, the kind of support that people have been provided has not kind of been very tailored or individual. So we know there is a bit of a challenge out there in the sense of just kind of raising the profile of long COVID with employers and workplaces and knowing how to support people. And that's definitely something we come up against on a regular basis when we're trying to support people. I just wanted to kind of put these quotes in really from what people have told us a little bit more about that lived experience of long COVID and trying to manage at work. So I love this picture here because this kind of comes up in every group that we do around people feeling as though it's a bit of an invisible illness, feeling as though I'm back at work now, people think I'm okay, but actually I'm really struggling. And these kinds of comments that people are giving me around, I give all my energy to work and really I've got nothing left when I get home. These are really common things that people are coming and telling me on a daily basis, or feelings of I don't have the energy for a social life, or I feel like I'm not believed because other people have recovered and I'm still here sort of struggling with this. So during the kind of sessions that we do, in a lot of these themes are kind of coming out all the time, and it's been really valuable for people to be able to share those with each other as well as with us, and to feel heard and validated, I think is a really big plus that we're noticing by doing the group work. So in terms of vocational rehab, I mean, traditionally, in any I've done before now, in my career before now, has been very much sort of one-to-one, personalised on an individual basis, and certainly face-to-face. So the way that our service works, predominantly being virtual, is that we were kind of wanting to think about it in a different way. So lots of traditional vocational rehab involves the professional directly communicating with the employer and working out what's going to work best for the individual. And what we wanted to do was in line with our values as a team, is we really wanted to promote that self-management approach. So what we're aiming to do is to give people the knowledge and the understanding of what they're entitled to, what support's available, how to ask for it, and what they might need, like educating them on what they need to help them manage a little bit better at work. We want to give them that knowledge themselves so they can go and ask for it. So it's not necessarily that we need to be doing all that communication, is that they can advocate for themselves. And that was really kind of the start off thought process behind doing this as kind of group work. Because what we were noticing is that doing it on a one-to-one basis, we were sort of repeating a lot of this advice over and over again. And actually a lot of it can be done as an education aspect in a group. So the way that we do vocational rehab in our team is that on the whole, we have two sets of groups, virtual groups. So we have a remaining work group for people who are currently employed, and a return to work group for people who are employed but off work sick. And so what we do is we have two educational 1 hour virtual sessions where we talk about lots of things. So where they can get support, what legislation says, what the law says. We talk about the guidance they can give to their managers, how to communicate. But a big part of it is also talking to the patient about what's your work-life balance like? What is your balance like? Are you giving all of your energy to work, and then you've got nothing really left at the end of the day for home and for personal life? And we also talk about in the return to work group more of that kind of emphasis around how you're going to get ready for work, how are you going to prepare for it, how are you going to build up what you're doing every day to be able to achieve that return to work. We talk about what a good return to work looks like, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about the reasonable adjustments. But what we do tend to find is that for most companies, they seem to have this sort of policy of 4 to 6 weeks phased return. And what we know for lots of people with long COVID is that's just simply doesn't fit with that kind of pacing ethos that we're trying to support them and teach them. And that a lot of the time that's a big stumbling block, is them not being able to get back to work in that 4-week period. So what I noticed when I first started in the services, so I was hearing lots of stories of coming to me and in the 2 weeks or the 4 weeks that had been suggested. And so extended phase returns have just been such a massive part of the success of getting people back into work. So we do talk a lot about that on the groups and what it should look like in relation to their pacing. And we very much talk about, are you ready to return to work as well? Are you ready? And what does that look like? And what does that feel like? So a lot of our work is about getting people back into work, but it's also about helping people to see whereabouts they are and actually, are they ready to go back to work? Is also a really big part of it. I'm just checking, Freya, because my VPN keeps going on and off, that you can all hear me okay. Yeah, you can, thank goodness.
There's a little bit of a break, but you keep coming back in. My heart keeps stopping and you keep coming back in.
Okay. Oh, fingers crossed that sorts itself out. So yeah, following the 2 one-off group sessions, we do a one-to-one session with the patient, and that's really aimed at personalizing the recommendations that we're going to make for them. And usually most of the time we kind of formulate that into an AHP report, which some of you might have heard of before or might not have done. And that's something that we then give to the patient, and they're then able to give that to their employer, making recommendations. And most of the time, I would say these are really well received by employers and are followed for the most part. And we really help people to see what other support might be available out there to help them where that might be a bit of a stumbling block. So support from union representatives. We also kind of signpost people to access to work as well. So kind of we're a cog in a big wheel of getting people back to work, and it's about getting them the right support and the right services involved. But for most people, I would say we do the group work and then they have a report, and then we bring them back to review them afterwards. If there is any questions about more questions about the group work or about anything kind of related to that, please just pop that in the chat and I'll try and answer them the best I can. So we support people really to think about the demands of work, really, and to break down their job role into these kind of areas. So the physical, the social, the cognitive, and the psychological. And we help them relate that to what their symptoms and what they're experiencing. So for lots of people, they kind of come in with this conception of, I'm not sure why I'm struggling so much. My job is office-based. I'm sat down all day, but I can't seem to concentrate. I'm really struggling. And we're sort of supporting them to look at their symptoms a little bit more holistically, and about those brain fog symptoms and the sorts of recommendations and support they might need in place to help them from that point of view. And for lots of people, we work with lots of people who work in the public sector, so teachers, NHS staff, who kind of that psychological stress and pressure related to their role is a really big part of what's exacerbating the symptoms. So we're helping people to look at really what is the biggest demand here for you, or what's the balance here looking like, and how might we be able to support you to look at practical things that help in each one of these areas. And we kind of use that to help the person create their own sort of self-management plan, if you like, of what things need to change in order to help them improve and manage a little bit better at work. So in terms of reasonable adjustments, these are the kinds of things we are realizing are what works the best for a successful phase return and for successful staying in work and managing in work well. So we know that flexibility for phased returns is absolutely key for lots of people. So have the ability to have an extended phase return is really great. So in terms of the kind of Length of that can really vary massively depending on what somebody needs, but sometimes for, you know, asking for phase returns over 3 months, 4 months. I've even had patients who've had phase returns over a 6-month period as well. In terms of kind of temporary or permanent changes to hours, that can be really useful as well for people. We know that sometimes they need to reduce their hours temporarily, and that can really help to support them to manage a little bit better in the long term. Flexibility for phase returns, and oh, sorry, that's a repeated one there. Additional sort of short breaks for people is really important to support them to kind of manage into pace. Changes to roles and responsibilities temporarily can be really key as well. Sort of looking at that kind of those demands and what is it that the person is really struggling with, and recommending kind of changes to that through using the report. A really big kind of factor in how well somebody's managing usually is the compassion and the understanding from their employer or their manager. And that can be really, really key and really important. Generally, what we're finding is the better support somebody has from an understanding manager, the better they will manage, and the kind of more successful a phased return is likely to be. The ability to work on a trial and learn basis is really key as well. So those employers who are willing to try a recommendation that we've asked for and kind of review it on a regular basis to see if it's working and change it as needed is really key as well. Sort of that home working, the ability for somebody to work from home, thinking about having car parking nearer to the building, say, for example, can massively help and aid somebody's ability to be able to kind of manage that commute into work. Thinking about strategies that might support somebody with brain fog. So often people are struggling in that kind of busy office environment, and they find that really, really challenging. So thinking about quieter office environments, we've even recommended things like noise cancelling headphones, which have made a big difference for people as well as that kind of working from home and the flexibility there. Reducing the need for kind of physical activity where that's practical for somebody in their role. Having supportive colleagues there's a lot of evidence to say having a supportive colleague at work can really make the difference between somebody managing well and not. And the biggest thing is really just for employers to be flexible and kind of work within policies and procedures, but also be willing to be flexible with that individual who's usually trying their absolute best to stay in work or return to work. So just a little bit about kind of what we've noticed from our group work. So these are kind of just some figures of what people, in terms of were they off work before or after our group sessions. So what we know is that after our group, this is kind of overall so far, we've noticed that so before the group, we had for our return to work group, there was 87% of people were off sick. And after that went down to just 12.5%. So a really big proportion of people we managed to get back to work there with this support. And the same for the remaining work. So generally people in our remaining work are in work, but occasionally we have people who have episodes of sickness as well. And again, quite a big jump and increase in people working after that. So we know that having the recommendations from a health professional in a report like this is really supporting people, and also people being able to advocate for themselves and to have that validation from others has been really key things that have come out. In terms of patient sort of feedback here, we know that about 65% of people have felt like they couldn't have returned to work without the support that we offered. And it had really made a significant improvement on their ability to manage at work. And there's just some quotes on here about what people had told us in our feedback questionnaire about our work group support. I've included some of the guidance and the webinars that we signpost people to, and for managers as well. So there's lots more information out there available. the CIPD, who is a professional body for HR, have some really good guidance on long COVID and how to support people as a manager, as a colleague, and even for the individual themselves as well. So I noticed there's a question there in the chat. So having a look at the guidance there about the symptoms and how to manage them at work might be more helpful for you there. So thank you everybody for listening. If anybody has got any questions, please feel free to ask.
Lovely, thanks Faye for taking us through them slides. If, as Faye said, if anyone's got any questions, put your hand up. I'll stop the recording at this point, and then people can bring in anything they want to ask Faye about.